Good morning and welcome in. It is a Marsh Pod version of SimWorld today on this Friday morning, May 3rd. We're running a little solo edition, so sorry to all y'all. We are getting rolling in the SWBA where two big nights of action, two elimination nights of action. We'll start in Indiana, where a game that was never going to be competitive was exactly that, uncompetitive. The Indiana Pacers moving on with a 120-98 blowout win over the Milwaukee Bucks. It didn't matter that Damian Lillard was in with 28 points, made 4 threes. It didn't matter that they got another good night from Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis. This is what we would have expected from a Milwaukee team that all season had been inconsistent, particularly had been inconsistent throughout 18-22. This was exactly the ending that we'd expect, particularly without Giannis Antetokounmpo. The Bucks just aren't a good enough basketball team to be able to survive their number one player not being on the floor, and that's truthfully accurate about any team that has an all-NBA guy. LeBron James, the Lakers are never going to advance. The Denver Nuggets, for as good as their depth are, we're never going to advance. But this is a referendum, if you will, on the Milwaukee Bucks' decision to trade away Jrue Holiday, who has been incredibly efficient and valuable for the Boston Celtics, in favor of Damian Lillard. They gave up the big piece of what could have helped this team where they were flawed at the most, which was, of course, on the defensive side of the ball. But again, Milwaukee, if we can finish the chat about where they're going to go. They weren't going to win this series, whether they had Damian Lillard, whether they had Jrue Holiday, without Giannis. Yesterday just was the final nail in a coffin of what's been a tumultuous season. Now, you're going to hear a lot from a lot of people over the offseason about Giannis and Dame leaving town and who could be asking for a trade. With the Miami Heat trying to get Dame now, I truthfully don't see any way that happens. Giannis has signed way too long of a contract. Damian Lillard still has a mammoth contract owed to him that's going to prevent the Milwaukee Bucks from getting a reasonable offer to recoup the assets that they sent away. This is the fact of star building in the modern day SWBA. The Phoenix Suns are the far end of that. Milwaukee's kind of like in the middle. They made the big swing to get Jrue Holiday. That paid off, truthfully. They got the championship. But the Bucks' inability to fill in, and you watch every single playoff game, the Bucks' inability to play or to fill in this roster with athletes, the teams that are advancing have that. The New York Knicks, who we'll talk about in a second, yeah, you might only play 7 guys, you might only play them 40 minutes, but they don't move the way older veteran players like this roster made up of Milwaukee is. If you look at this box score, right, and you watch the game, and you see Obi Toppin going for 21, Obi Toppin's not a great basketball player. He went 3 of 10 from deep, so he went 5 of 5 from the floor. Obi Toppin is just more athletic, and this was the case all series. He was constantly beating Bucks defenders on back cuts. He was getting second chance opportunities, which is what the Knicks feasted on against the 76ers. That's the challenge that Milwaukee had when you go all in around Giannis, who might be the most athletic player in the entire league, and Damian Lillard, who is in his mid-30s and has never been a supreme athlete. He's just been a great shot maker. They didn't have any of that. And so last night, a 22-point loss closes the lid on what's been an incredibly disappointing season. Is Doc Rivers going to keep his job? Probably. I would be hard-pressed to imagine he walks out the door, considering he walked in halfway through. And truthfully, if they bounce Doc and it is any way related to Giannis wanting out or wanting Doc out, then that's another mark on what's been a bit of a growing concern of player, particularly in this case Giannis, picking their coach and getting it completely wrong. Milwaukee's got a challenge ahead of them. Every team that goes into luxury tax and then subsequently the second luxury tax, I don't know if Milwaukee's quite there or not, I doubt it, they start to run out of room to put in good pieces. You have to say, let's rely on Malik Beasley, a flawed defender. Let's rely on 40 minutes from Patrick Beverley, who's 7 years past his prime. Let's rely on 31 Brook Lopez minutes, who's 35. You need depth, and you don't need 10-man depth. You need 7 to 8-man depth, and the Bucks didn't have that. The Pacers did. This is going to be an exciting move on for the Pacers. They're going to get the Knicks. It's just going to be athlete on athlete. It's going to be high flying. That from the Pacers standpoint, It might not be high flying scoring, but it's going to be high flying bodies all over the court. Should be good. Let's move to that other game, which is Philadelphia and New York. Game 6. The Sixers, they gave it everything they could, but the 24-point deficit they handed themselves in the first quarter was ultimately too much. Start on the losing side. This was almost the Buddy Hield game. He kept them single-handedly in this. All of his majority of his production coming in that first quarter, where he just started burying triples that helped flip this from what was a 20-point game down. But Jalen Brunson is incredible. 40 points again. He's. If you said you knew that Jalen Brunson was going to be this guy, tip the cap, because he was not this dude in Dallas. And Dallas is lucky they found a way to get a guy like Kyrie Irving in there, because if he was doing this and the Mavs were still struggling, this would be a huge deal beyond what it already is, because he's been, despite his size, despite his lack of athleticism, he's an incredible shot maker. He gets to the line constantly, got to the line 16 times last night. He's efficient in the mid-range, which is something Maestro and I have talked about on some recent podcasts, and that the best players in the league are in the mid-range constantly, and they're making those shots. That's what Jalen Brunson did. And do I think the Knicks can win the conference finals? I don't, because I think Boston is still just far too good for the Knicks to be able to get over that. But an Eastern Conference Finals trip now for New York, which would be the biggest deal that this organization, the city has had basketball-wise since the 70s, would be monumental. But what they did last night was what they did this entire series: get offensive rebounds. And the ironic part about it is it was a pretty good offensive second chance point night for the 76ers, but 20 offensive rebounds. I think 15 of them came in the first 3 quarters before finally the Sixers, which baffles me that in an elimination game in that first quarter, the Sixers came out like it was a January 17th game, right? They had Kelly Oubre constantly getting beat to the ball, Tobias Harris giving up offensive boards, nobody boxing out Josh Hart, who again has 14 rebounds, 6 of them offensive. It makes no sense to me that Philadelphia came so athletically, and not athletically, so effortly unprepared for this game. It's normally the other way around in a closeout game with the home team being down 3-2. It was the complete opposite. The Sixers in the first quarter looked flat as heck, and that's ultimately what cost them this, because they were playing catch-up from that moment on. Because you get the Buddy Hield avalanche when you're down 7, and instead now you're up 13. That's different. Instead, they needed Buddy Hield's eruption just to draw even in a game that they just looked like they had no business being in through the first 12 minutes. The Knicks, where do they go from here? Well, you've already got the Devin Booker rumors, which is just prime. We are prime post-elimination content. LeBron James might retire. Devin Booker would really love to go to New York. This, that, and the other. The Knicks are good enough to make the SWBA Finals with Jalen Brunson and Jalen Brunson alone. This is a roster doing it without Julius Randle. Do I think Julius Randle changes them? No, I don't. But I think they have a legitimate shot, obviously, to make it there. Ultimately, I don't think they're going to beat the Boston Celtics, who continue to look dominant. You know, a 5-game should have been 4-game sweep, and truthfully, we should have been 3 if we could have been lucky and just opted out after a 3-0 lead should they have had it. One thing I was thinking of last night, though, how lucky are we that the Miami Heat didn't beat 76ers in that play-in game to get robbed of this? And then how unlucky are we that we don't get a Game 7, because this was a series that could have been 3-2 in the opposite direction, and you could make an argument the better team won. The Knicks were the better team than Philadelphia all season, but in a league that's getting closer and closer, another proof point of why regular season games matter much more than the players want to tell you, than the teams that want to tell you. The Sixers were 3 games behind the New York Knicks, and granted, in a very contested or congested Eastern Conference, but 3 games behind the Knicks for the 7th seed. The Pacers were 2 games back of the Bucks for the 6th seed. You're easily looking at matchups and seedings that could have gone other ways if teams take the regular season seriously, or, as I would advocate for, we lower the number of SimWorld, or excuse me, SWBA games from 82 down to 65, 75 in that ballpark. Moving on to SimWorld Prep, where, we thought we were going to get a nice one in that opener. We sure didn't. We sure did not. Avery Cooks, 18 points, leads Gulf Coast Lockdown with a blowout over AT Aliens. They're now tied in the region for first place in the Southern region. It's been a fun watch to see this arrival of Avery Cooks. I don't know that many people would have expected him to be this guy, right? Carson Cuthbert all season long has been the number 2 for Gulf Coast behind Kai Killens. But the scary part of this was last night's game, a game that flirted with being a double up all night long. Kai Killens took 10 shots, made 6 of them. Carson Cuthbert took 7 shots, made 2 of them. This was another example of Avery Cooks, like we said, and Ezekiel Bull running to the rim. And I think actually there's a little bit of Avery Cooks action that's on ball, right? He's been doing his damage these last 2 games. He had, 21, I think, on Tuesday. Avery Cooks has been doing his damage running to the rim, but you'll see it every now and again. He had it when he was matched up. I don't think it was Resurretta, but I can't remember who the defender. It was another big for Indy. He just is taking guys, other big men off the dribble, backing them up about 7 feet beyond the 3-point line, and just going straight downhill on them. And they have no opportunity to match his athleticism. Now, do I think Avery Cooks is going to be, a superstar in the making? That'd be impressive, but he's 15 years old. And at 6'9", 221, I don't think it's unrealistic to think Avery Cooks could be a difference maker when the floor clears a little bit with him on ball. It's what I would look to see a little bit more of out of Gulf Coast this season and into next. All right, next up, as we close out the show here, this Marsh Pod edition of SimWorld Today, I'll wrap up every single game around the league. Let's start with Run DMV and the North, where 8 points from the North in the fourth quarter helps Run DMV walk away with this one. 21 from Keith Singleton, 21 for the North's Akeem Young, and 18 from Alex Rodriguez. All that not enough. 14 boards from Kadarius Rupp. Headed over Southeast Select. They cannot stop Latin America. Red Joints are 16 points, albeit pretty unefficiently. Franklin Tyson with 12 and 9. And Latin America snaps the 7-game winning streak for Southeast Select. Gulf Coast Lockdown, we talked about it. 18 from Cooks. 10 assists from Carson Cuthbert. 3 steals from Iko Kasai, who looked frisky off the bench with 8 points. And an 80-45 beatdown in front of Outcast. Nonetheless, embarrassment for AT Aliens. Yacht Club, they hold off H-Town Hoopers with a 10-point win. They get outscored by 11 points in the fourth quarter. Still hang on because 20 points from Almighty Soul was just not enough. 18 and 16 from Trey Willis and Darius McBride for the Yacht Club. Heartland Zombie Stars, how about 18 from Benari James, 13, 9, and 5 from Jaquan Johnson. All of that overshadows 51 points combined from Damian Luffy and Jarrell Beauchamp for Oceania, but it's the 14th win of Heartland Zombie Stars season, 75-66. Moving over Rocky Mountain, we thought maybe they were changing for the better. No, sir, they're not. A 1-point loss to South America and 19 points from Dink Payton. Not enough because of 19 of his own from Adelson Sampaio. 5 assists from Junior Espinoza helps South America advance with a 1-point win. And that is our SimWorld wrap-up. We are off until Saturday, where we've got a little matinee version for you at noon. Philadelphia Elite and SimWorld Atlantis, quickly becoming a frisky, fun one. Atlantis has been awesome as of late. 3 straight wins to get to 18 and 11. Interesting point there. 18 points or 18 wins for SimWorld Atlantis. They've got an outside shot of getting to the number 1 ranking in all of SimWorld Prep. Wouldn't matter. They're probably going to wrap up the Intercontinental region here in a matter of wins. They're up 3 on SimWorld Europe. But a team that we kind of had sitting around doing nothing, who I said Tomas Kusa was Coach of the Year. I'm going to jump on the soapbox. They were 500. I said he was doing a lot of things with not a lot. He has made a lot of things a lot better. 18 and 11 SimWorld Atlantis against Philadelphia Elite. My only upset part about that is that's a Saturday game. Would have loved a little Tuesday night primetime, but tune in there noon for what figures to be a good one. All right, for my partner that doesn't exist because it's myself, I appreciate you tuning in. You have a great weekend. We'll see you on SimWorld TV throughout the weekend, and then coming back here bright and early Monday morning, recap more off-season, or excuse me, weekend hoops. Coming back to you then. Thanks again for joining us. This has been SimWorld Today here on SimWorld TV, the only place you can see the game, be the game.
This has been a presentation of SimWorld.